Mm. Well, and let's get into it then, because the violence that we're seeing in Minnesota, the heavy-handed, quasi-fascistic police state brutality that we're seeing on the streets of suburbs in Minnesota, that they seek to now export to the rest of the country. All of this kind of stems from the problem of illegal immigration. And, I would even say, Derrick, this is what gets me. Uh, I am a conservative. I'm a Christian. I believe in rule of law. I believe in law and order. I believe in borders. I believe in boundaries. I believe that illegal immigrants who are here illegally should go back to their home countries. I believe all of those things, and I'm not changing my position on that. But I can't get past the fact that so many of the illegal immigrants that we're talking about today were smuggled into the interior of the United States of America by our own governments, our own intelligence agencies, uh, you know, uh, non-governmental organizations, all of these organizations that are pipelined to our politicians in Washington, D.C. and global politicians, right? This was a systematic import of illegals with the purpose of destabilizing the United States of America, and then also aiding and abetting the trafficking of children, the trafficking of drugs and humans and weapons into the country and out of the country. Like, you know, all of the problems that we're seeing in Minnesota and that we're going to see in cities across the country are problems that this government, two parties, both Democrats and Republicans, have created. And, this is such an important point for people to understand. It seems like we can never get to that point. Like, they're so good at dividing us into the factions and ginning up the hatred. But, what are your thoughts on what's happening regarding the ICE roundups in Minnesota? Let's start there, but also,
Sure.
linking that to your research and a lot of the research that you do on your site.
Yeah, so Shannon, I just want to say that I think it's something that I do commend you for everything you just said there as far as your positions as a Christian, as a conservative, and your beliefs about immigration and immigration policy, and still being willing to call out the violence that is happening, because I think that there are a lot of people who hold those positions that you have, but then because of that, they don't allow themselves to say, but this is wrong. The way this is being
Right.
handled is wrong, and this is not going to end up somewhere good. And I've been trying to kind of put that talking point out there. As you said, we're kind of having to swim through a sea of propaganda and division, which is absolutely by design. You must be this side or you must be this side, when most of the time life is more complex and not black and white.
Right.
But the fact remains that the immigration police state, which is what it is, I believe this is all being done by design. And I've been saying this since the beginning of Trump's first term back in 2015, that one of the issues that they would use well before we knew about COVID, of course, COVID, a couple of years, we saw the biosecurity police state related to vaccines and lockdowns and all that sort of stuff. That
Mm.
still is relevant. But for now, that card has been set aside. The card that is being played and the card that was being played during Trump's first term is immigration. And I've been putting out reports since then. You can find them on the Conscious Resistance. Just search immigration, warning that this issue would be used to build a police state, and it would be used to divide the masses. And I think this is all being done by design by the folks that are really at the top, what I tend to call the predator class, the people at the top of the pyramid of power, who use issues like this to create the divide and conquer. So on one hand, they weaponize immigration, whether you're talking about in Europe or the United States. And what I mean by that is they allow certain border policies that are lax so that floods of people can come in. And of course, at the same time, we have to acknowledge that a lot of people are trying to get away from violence at their home countries, largely because of US foreign policy, because of US intervention, because of CIA coups and overthrowing. Like, there's that whole legacy and history that I don't think a lot of conservatives are contending with, going back to the 50s of the US overthrowing Latin American countries. Those
Mm.
problems haven't been solved in the last 7 years. So there's still a lot of, you when you overthrow a country, you create chaos. That leads to things like gangs. That leads to things like cartels. That leads to a fracturing of the normalcy in a certain country. Those problems still exist, including in the country that I live in now, in Mexico and elsewhere. And there are many people who are still dealing with those circumstances, and so they choose to try to find a better life. And well, the United States is one of those places that people look to. So you kind of have this typical problem, reaction, solution scenario going on. A problem is created or allowed to fester. The people react. In this case, you could say foreigners of Latin American and South American countries, as well as elsewhere. Let's say in the Middle East, there's a lot of them who've come to the US as well, saying like, I'm trying to get away from violence and the US seems like a better life for me. And they try to do so, and some of them come legally, maybe others come illegally. Sometimes people also cross with the belief, because they're being brought by human traffickers, they believe that they're coming legally. They get lied to and they say, yeah, your paperwork's going to be all up to par. And they get there and then later on realize, oh, wait, I'm not here legally. And now I owe this guy money. There's a lot of complicated situations in that.
Yeah, to your point, I don't want to interrupt you too much, but these non-governmental organizations that I mentioned, Catholic Charities would be one of those organizations, and there are a whole host of them, very well funded, probably seeded by billionaires, trillionaires, oligarchs, and they are sending people into the interior of these countries. They are putting them on planes, trains, and automobiles. They are giving them the necessary paperwork they need to get over the border, and they are selling them a bill of goods. And I just imagine, a family escaping violence in a foreign country. They don't speak our language. Someone comes to them and says, hey, did you know, like, there's this program, and if you just do this, sign here, get on the bus, we'll take you to a better place, and you can have education and healthcare. Like, who wouldn't take that? Like, who wouldn't do that? And so then these people, so it's just not. And I'm not becoming a bleeding heart liberal, I promise. Like, they should go home.
It's a multi-layered situation, I think, is kind of the point here, right? Is that it's not as simple as maybe some conservatives or right-wingers or MAGA would like to say that, okay, this is all just men of military age, it's an invasion, it's, there's all these different talking points that get thrown around. There might be some truth to that mixed in there as well. But, my point with bringing up the foreign policy is just to start with that the situation is more complex than people want to believe. So you've got this, crap storm of stuff coming in, people coming in. And of course, as you said, Democratic politicians and others literally bringing people, shipping them to random parts of the country, dropping them off. I don't think it's the fault of most of these people who are generally just seeking a better life. And I think most people who are living in a war zone or coming from a place of violence, if they had looking at their kids and their family, they would probably do the exact same thing if they thought it would make something better. So we have that situation going on, but then it's been brewing, it's been festering. And so during Trump's first term, and of course, during the Biden years, this issue has been rising. And from my perspective and my analysis, there was also lots of false propaganda being circulated in right-wing circles, things about like foreigners eating their pets and things which I don't think really go back to any factual information. And again, I know that it's a complex issue, and you could probably find one example of something that gets then turned into this big story. And then the next thing you know, it's repeated everywhere ad nauseum. And people are like, they're coming to eat our pets and they're all violent gang members. And Trump, of course, is literally saying this. They're sending rapists, they're sending murderers, they're sending killers, right? So this is getting beaten into people's minds. That builds up over time. And then, of course, Trump says, elect me and I will do something about it. We're going to have the biggest, largest deportation operation ever. Promises he's only going to go after violent criminals. We've obviously seen that that's not the case. Right. And many people are still cheering it on, even though American citizens are starting to be targeted. And I've had people say this to me, and I've seen you battling them out there where, an American citizen gets detained for 48 to 72 hours, which I don't know about you guys, but it probably would be pretty traumatic to get taken by ICE, because these guys aren't just being nice. Okay, yeah, hey, we need to go take you and check your paperwork. It'll be okay. If we're wrong, we'll let you go. No, they're kidnapping people violently. Anybody who opposes them potentially could be killed or beaten up. And then, whoops, sorry, our bad, and we'll let you go. Like, that is a traumatic thing. Not only is it a violation of the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, basic human decency, human rights, all this sorts of stuff. It just, I think, though, this was built by design, that everything we are witnessing has been done by design to get the conservatives, who typically are against big government and typically against tyranny like this, to cheer it on as long as it's happening to so-called illegals, even though we know that's not the case.
It will never, ever, ever end with illegals. It will always. We're already seeing it, right? We are seeing, they are normalizing the harassment and the persecution, the detainment and the abuse of American citizens. Renee Good was an American citizen. Whether you agree with her tactics or not, whether or not she was irritating or making it difficult for ICE officials to complete their tasks, she was still an American citizen. And we have a video here. There's just recently, and it's interesting. I was talking to my mom the other day about how all of this is happening, the Somali daycare centers where all the fraud was happening, and now all of the ICE action is happening. It's in Minnesota. Like, you really can see that it's a theater, right? It's a controlled
Absolutely.
theater. You have all the actors. You have, Tim Walz, the Democrat governor. He's going to play his role and fan the flames for the left. And you have Donald Trump and Kristi Noem. They'll play their role and fan the flames for the right. And you can just see it becoming a tinderbox. But then you can see that justification. Well, screw it all. Deploy the military. Forget about ICE. Deploy the military everywhere. And that's what we're going to have two videos we're going to look at when we come back with you, Derrick, as we continue to take this issue apart. Unfortunately, this, I think, is going to be the reality of 2026. Our job is to be able to identify PSYOPs very quickly, to be able to identify the problem reaction solution very quickly, to call out both sides of the political aisle, left and right, very quickly, so that we, the people of the United States of America, can make sure that we're not used as pawns in their agenda to destroy our Constitution, our way of life, our pursuit of happiness, and our liberty. Like, that's the mission, Derrick. And unless we understand this larger picture that we're going to try to explain to you through this issue of ICE in Minnesota, we're not going to be able to do that. So let's look at those videos when we come back. Today, we are joined by Derrick Broze. He is the founder and the editor-in-chief over at the Conscious Resistance Network. It's theconsciousresistance.com. You can also, of course, follow Derrick on Twitter. I follow him as well. We will be back to continue this discussion with him in a moment here on the Shannon Joy Show. Welcome back, everyone, to the Shannon Joy Show. Today, we are looking at the ICE overreach in Minnesota and calls now from the Republican conservative right to expand the military occupation into more cities across the country. That happened on Steve Bannon's War Room just yesterday. We're going to look at that video in a moment. We are joined today by Derrick Broze, an independent investigative researcher and journalist, and the editor-in-chief over at the Conscious Resistance, to talk about this topic. There was another video released yesterday, Derrick, and this is video of a 17-year-old Target worker who was heckling and using expletives, very disrespectful expletives, but also videotaping ICE agents. He was a U.S. citizen, and he was tackled, he was detained, and then released hours later, apparently in a Walmart. So the arrest happened at Target. He ended up at Walmart. He's 17 years old. Of course, 99% of conservative media is saying this is justified. The Department of Homeland Security came out with a tweet yesterday saying that it was a justifiable arrest because he was harassing, or no, he was impeding on the actions of ICE. This is a video. It was a short video yesterday. And of course, all of the circus clowns on the right were like, oh, did you see the full video? He hit an ICE agent. We have the whole video here, before and after. And there's just a couple of things I want you guys to look for in this video. First and foremost, was this young man, impeding these officers and whatever it is they were seeking to achieve, and did he assault them? That was the justification that the DOH, listed as reason for his arrest. But then I'd also like you to look at the demeanor of these ICE agents and ask yourself whether or not they are conducting themselves professionally, with prudence, in a manner that seeks to calm situations down and contribute to law and order, or are they conducting themselves with a demeanor that is intended to agitate and frighten and terrify and horrify? And this is what I think the issue is. This is why I am convinced, as I mentioned, Derrick, I think that Minnesota is a theater. I think that there are actors on the ground, not all of them, but some. I think that the political actors are playing their parts, Walz and Donald Trump, and that this is indeed a PSYOP designed to acclimate and normalize police state tactics and surveillance tactics in the US, and they want to export this into other states. That's my operating thesis. And we're going to get, I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But Derrick, let's take a look at this video, and then I'd like to get your thoughts on what happened in Minnesota.
You doing all right?
Huh? I'm not doing all right.
What's that?
I'm not doing all right.
Sound?
I'm not doing all right.
I can't hear
Back
what
up.
you're
Yo. See that? Look, they're recording. They're here. What y'all doing? Yo, back up.
What's that?
You good?
Oh, absolutely.
Your face.
Absolutely. Oh, back up. I'm walking here. Back up.
Like that. Do the show.
Hey, that's not a nice guy.
I don't give a fuck.
Good.
You and fuck all y'all. What you gonna do?
Hey, you guys American citizens?
Huh?
American citizens?
None of your business. That's what.
The wall there. All right.
See that? Blocking traffic. Look at that. Bunch of y'all right there. Every single one of y'all. Look at that.
Just gonna get a pic. Hold on.
Go ahead, take a pic right there.
All right. Let me get one of this guy here.
Right here.
Appreciate
That. Hey, don't touch him. Don't touch him. What are you doing? Come on. Yo.
I work here, bro.
Yeah, he works.
Touch me. I tell you.
Look at that. Look at that. Look, 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 look. Look, they're grabbing him. Look, they're grabbing him. Yo, let him go, let him go, let him go.
All right, so that young man in Target, 17 years old, this is the young man they said hit an ICE officer, which justified the arrest, the detainment of ICE. Derrick Broze is with us today to go over this. He has now been released. He was released at a Walmart. In my opinion, this is horrifying, absolutely horrifying. It is illegal, immoral, unconstitutional, not justifiable in any way, shape, or form. Derrick, what are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree. I mean, first off, on what you said a moment ago, I do think that there's some kind of psyop going on in Minnesota. I don't think it's a coincidence that you have this Somali fraud story kind of exploding overnight, which not to say that there isn't any fraud there, but it just seems so convenient that the focus goes on Minneapolis, goes on that state. People are right-wing media and also are getting, upset. There's this pushback. And then all of a sudden, the shooting of Renee Good happens, and not to say that shooting wasn't real or anything like that, but it just seems so convenient and coincidental that all the energy and all the attention is being pulled that way. Right. And as far as this whole Target thing, I've seen these videos going around. Yeah, I mean, look, those guys, those young men, they weren't impeding with anything. Sure, they're cussing at the cops, and probably that's not an advisable strategy, although I understand the frustration, but it's not illegal. It's not unconstitutional. In fact, the Constitution protects, as the Supreme Court has said, you can give cops a middle finger if you want. You can cuss at them. Again, that doesn't mean they won't then use that as an excuse to try to bother you and harass you, as we see here. But technically, it is 100% illegal, whether people agree with it or not. That's up for debate. But it is constitutionally protected. It is legal. They didn't try to stop them from doing anything. They're just standing there and, expressing their opinion, no matter how ugly people might think it is or the words they use, they might not agree with. They didn't do anything wrong. But of course, that gets the attention turned on them. The other point I want to mention is that guy that said, you American citizen, and started taking a picture with him. That is Greg Bovino, who is one of the heads of Border Patrol. And he has been getting a lot of attention. I think he needs more attention because that guy is largely behind this whole kind of authoritarian push. He, in my view, seems to be really championing that, like you said, this sort of unprofessional mentality behind ICE and this authoritarian mentality. And the other thing is, I sent a couple articles there, if you guys got them, that there recently was reporting that ICE is using this particular app to scan the faces of people on the street. And so he wasn't just taking a selfie. I guarantee you what he was doing was taking that picture and then uploading it to a facial recognition database to confirm whether he's an American citizen. And so this whole idea that they needed to kidnap this guy and go, because as you said, there's after video where they take him away. The guy comes out, he's crying his eyes out. He's apparently bleeding, saying they beat him up, and then they just drop him off, right? So For one, I think that technology is dangerous. It's part of the march towards the technocratic state where we're just going to be scanned everywhere we go to determine your citizenship. But if they are using that technology, which supposedly is going to make their jobs easier and quicker, then why couldn't they just scan his face? Okay, he is an American citizen, whatever, he's talking crap about us, let's move on. It's because they are trying to send a message. They want anybody who is opposing them or standing against them or even just being critical of them with their words, which I guess now the right wing believes words are violence, if that's impeding, that they want people to get the message. If you stand against us, if you oppose us, if you call us out, we will harass you. You will become our focus. You will become the target. And I think that is a very dangerous message that we all need to be concerned about.
It's interesting that you mention Greg Bovino, because it was his energy that I picked up on. He's strutting out of his car and he's got this scarf around his neck. Why are you wearing a scarf? Is that smart for a military person who might get involved in scuffles and have to do athletic things? Are you supposed to have a scarf flopping around your neck? Like, who are you? And he goes, get out of my way. Can't you see I'm walking here? As if he owns the streets,
Yeah.
right? And so these guys, in fact, I'll take it one step forward from what you just said. Clearly, they used expletives and swear words. I agree with you. If I were the left, I wouldn't be doing that right now. I'd be very, very clear and concise. I would say, I'm here observing you, videotaping you, because this is illegal, unconstitutional, and immoral. And, where's your badge? What is your name? And that's what I would do if I were in that situation. And this is why I think there might be actors on the left who are also agitating or getting people to act in an agitated manner. But, I think it's very important. I actually commend, I never thought I would say this, but, for those on the left, people who are classical liberals who still believe in the Constitution and believe in freedom of the press, we're all citizen journalists now. What they're doing is a great service. These videos that they're taking are critically important for people to see and understand, because guys, this is going to come to your town or village or city next, complete with the facial recognition technology. And by the way, Christine Ohm just told us they're going to use the drones. They're going to use the drones, and they're going to justify probably $100 billion contract with Palantir and the techno-fascists to make sure we're all safe in our cities in 2026 moving forward. Am I wrong?
No, you're 100% right. And the Palantir connection is important because Palantir under Peter Thiel and under Donald Trump, this first year of his second administration in 2025, they've gotten huge contracts and millions of dollars. And of course, ICE continues to get a bloated budget, which I think is not something people should be celebrating. And ultimately, I mean, back to the point you were making earlier about your views about being Christian, conservative, and having, thinking that border policy should be enforced, but also not supporting what's happening. I want to take off my journalist hat for a second, and just from my activist kind of philosophy perspective, I'm a libertarian anarchist. I'm a voluntarist. I don't necessarily believe government should be in charge of borders in a perfect world, but I also recognize that that's not the world we live in, right? So I'm not somebody who thinks we should just have open borders and flood in whoever, but I also don't think that what we're seeing right now is correct or, like I said, constitutional or moral in any way, constitution, whatever. It's just not a moral thing to be supporting. But I guess my message here is that I think that we need more people who see themselves as conservatives, limited government, Republicans, small government, whatever that means for some people who still hold on to those values, to say that you can take the position you're taking, Shannon, that you can be a small government, limited government, conservative, Republican, MAGA, and believe in border policy and still say that this is wrong. I think that there is a space for that, to say, I want to enforce border policy, but the optics of this are not good. The optics of giving ICE pretty much carte blanche to just go around and harass anybody in the streets, which is absolutely what's happening. I mean, there's been reporting that at least a couple hundred Americans have already been detained. And these videos, they're circulating. These are just a couple of videos, the ones we're talking about today. There are plenty of videos that are not going viral, that are not getting the attention they deserve, where ICE is just randomly stopping cars and just harassing people, where ICE is going onto people's private property. I've seen videos of that where somebody, again, maybe they're heckling them from their front porch as ICE is walking through the streets. And next thing you know, ICE is running onto the front porch, say, give me your ID. Who are you? What are you about? And that is all illegal. It's all unconstitutional. So again, I think that there needs to be a space for conservatives to say, I support the enforcement of border policy and immigration policy. I don't support the militarization of the streets. I don't support the authoritarianism. I don't support giving ICE, freedom to bother anybody without repercussion, because I guarantee you, I mean, I don't even think we need to wait for an investigation to find out. And I hope and pray I'm wrong, but that the officer who shot Renee Good is not going to be held accountable for anything. The officer who dragged this young man at the target, and
welcome back, everyone. Sorry about that. We were talking about very, very important topics, Derrick, and actually busting through the two-party political paradigm, exposing the psyops in Minnesota. Maybe that's why we had some technical difficulties in that last segment, but thank you to Annie for taking care of things. We are joined by Derrick Broze. He's going to be with us for just a couple more minutes. Derrick, before I let you go, I want to replay the insane statements that were made by, to your point, we need more conservatives to put their heads on straight, remember the Constitution, remember the rule of law, common sense, and just plain sanity, get their heads out of Donald Trump's rear end and start calling a spade a spade. All right. And clearly Steve Bannon is interesting. Steve Bannon, the guy who lured his entire audience to Capitol Hill on January 6th so that they could be geo-fenced and tracked and surveilled by drone technology. By the way, that was Palantir. Then rounded up by Capitol Police, Derrick, and having their rights and their constitutional rights absolutely crushed in that action. So many of them languished in the DC gulag for years without representation, due process. I mean, you name it. And people like Steve Bannon, people on the right, had a lot to say about that, the overreach, the militarization of Capitol Police and the infringement on their rights. They have nothing to say about what's happening in Minnesota. We'll start there. But, these were the comments made by Mark Mitchell, a Rasmussen pollster and Republican influencer, that I believe indicates where they want to go with this, to your point, and why, again, we need as many people to wake up as possible in the next few months, because we cannot let them achieve this. Let's take a look at that statement, and then we'll go for final statements from Derrick in just a moment.
Troops that we never fired. Like, let's get some people up there. Let's do it in California. Let's do it in New York. Let's do it in New Jersey, and make it lay bare.
Okay.
Oh, we lost it. Hey, Annie, can we try that again? I think we lost the video. Did we lose Annie?
California, let's do it in New York, let's do it in New Jersey. And so here's where I think it matters. Like, this is not the same America 10 years ago that kind of cared about the Constitution and all the finer details about entitlement reform and red versus blue policy. No, again, these people think the system has failed. They want a brutal return to order, and they want people held accountable. And so what Trump could do between now and November is just like surge these cities with everybody. Yeah. Like, forget just ICE. People protest ICE. Are people going to protest the United States Marine Corps? Let's, use the Insurrection Act. Or what about all those 80,000 armed IRS troops that we never fired? Like, let's get some people up there. Let's do it in California. Let's do it in New York. Let's do it in New Jersey, and make it lay bare.
Okay.
All right, that was Mark Mitchell. Yeah, Derrick, and this is key. We're not the same people that we were 10 years ago. He's talking about conservatives. Mm-hmm. He said, we're not the same people that we were 10 years ago that cared about the Constitution. That's the play. That's the play.
It's a psyop. It's a psyop to get people who, again, as I said earlier, who are typically the people who care about limited government and the Constitution, which let's be real, for the most part, the left doesn't really, pay much attention to those things. They want to expand the government, as we saw during COVID.
Yeah.
And he's trying to sort of set that talking point into the minds of the listeners, saying, yeah, maybe you cared about the Constitution 10 years ago, but times have changed. Now we need a brutal return to power, as he said there. And also the other thing that caught my ear was his mentioning of, oh, what about those 20,000 or 10,000, whatever it was, IRS agents that never got fired.
Right.
So you went from let's abolish the IRS and all that sort of talk with people in Trump's cabinet and his going to do something about it, or their IRS is targeting conservatives. Now it's like, let's take those people and let's militarize them and put them on the streets. I mean, I'm laughing, but it's sad. It's very sad. And what makes me more sad is that there are people who are probably hearing that and then thinking it's a great idea and embracing it. I absolutely, again, think that this has been a long game to take the people who believe in the Second Amendment, who oppose the federal government, and who oppose a strong central government and have been concerned about government tyranny for decades, something that the left is pretty much, oh, come on, you guys are just being right-wing crazies. And now mostly it's the left opposing it. Of course, they're opposing it on this one issue. They were pretty silent during COVID. But you're taking that crowd of people who typically would be the ones to resist this and to oppose it. And now you're getting them in a position where they are thinking that this is something that they should embrace. And I just wanted to add another point real quick that I was saying before we got cut off, that all of this is really a result of the militarization that we've seen in the United States post 9/11 with the war of terror and all of the weapons that were used in the Middle East. They eventually came back to the United States under the federal 1033 program, which allowed local police departments to buy surplus equipment from the military. And that includes LRAD sound cannons, the tanks, the drones. That's why you see local police departments being militarized the last decade plus. And the immunity that was granted to police when they act violent towards their citizens is the same type of immunity that is now being extended to agencies like ICE. And so I think that these problems can all be traced back to what we've seen, this explosion of militarization of all police departments, local, state, and federal in the post 9/11 world. But now it's being applied specifically to the immigration issue. And so it's kind of like we went from 9/11, you had the war on terror and the focus on terrorism, just in terms of Middle Eastern terrorism and things like that. And then some talk about domestic terrorism, but now we're seeing it switch to narco terrorism, for example, like what we're seeing with Venezuela. And in a lot of the immigration issue, it's being boosted because people have been told, well, the streets of the United States have been flooded with drugs coming from cartels, which is partially true in some cases, but that's also the excuse that's being used in order to justify this. Well, we have violent illegal immigrants, we have violent cartels flooding the streets of drugs, therefore we need to shred the Constitution or at least set it aside. And these people are mistaken because they believe this is only going to be applied to illegals, as we've been showing today. This is going to come back and it will eventually land at your doorstep if you embrace it.
Derrick Broze, very astute observations. Before I let you go, why is Steve Bannon always in the middle of these psyops? Like, what is it about Steve Bannon that puts him at the center point of so many of these really important paradigm shifting moments within the conservative movement? I mean, he is the guy that ushered in Donald Trump, who, as we all know, was a left-leaning, liberal New York City Democrat his entire life. Okay. I mean, but it's just interesting. I mean, you might not have any observations on that, but Steve Bannon always has himself in the middle of all of this.
He's an important player, and I've written about him in some different ways. I mean, obviously he's not, as far as we know, publicly in the second Trump administration like he was in the first one, but he definitely is an important player in this. And you can go back and, I encourage people to go back and look at the original research of the Cambridge Analytica scandal and Steve Bannon's ties to Cambridge Analytica. Look up the Israeli Psy group and their project called Project Rome. There's some interesting Israeli ties. There's some interesting information about how the Trump campaign, although we don't have the document to prove it, we definitely can see some connections between Bannon, between the Israeli Psy group, and how they were from the very beginning scooping up social media data in order to understand how to send out the messages that they knew would either excite the base or piss them off. And I think that information is still being used by people like Bannon. And so I do think he's still an important player in the Trump administration, even if it's not something we're seeing publicly.
And remember, he had that nice long sit down in collaboration with Jeffrey Epstein. They were working together.
Absolutely.
Steve Bannon was working with Jeffrey Epstein to try to rehabilitate his character for, after he was to get out of prison. So what does that tell you? Derrick Broze, great work. So thankful for your voice. His handle on Twitter at @DBrozeLiveFree is the handle on Twitter. And his organization is the Conscious resistance.com. Please support them, support Derrick, support his team. We need more independent truth tellers out there. Keep up the great work. Okay, Derrick?
Thank you so much, Shannon. Have a good day.
All right, you too. The Derrick Broze. And I told you guys that you were going to enjoy the interview with Derrick. Really